Alright, hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be covering a very complex topic in chess, which is how to make good positional moves. And positional chess itself is a very broad topic with just so much to it that it's impossible to cover everything in one video. But what I thought I'd give you guys is just 3 questions you can ask yourself, which can help you just make better positional moves. And I think to preface all this, I should say that you shouldn't just be asking yourself these questions if you have some like really sharp opposite side castling Sicilian position where you're about to get like checkmate or something. In those types of positions, you really need to be sharp and like be seeing like all sorts of tactics and be calculating. But what I'm going to be the questions I'm going to be giving you today, these are stuff you need to be asking yourself in positions which are a lot more quiet and the nature of the position is a lot slower. I should also note that these questions are questions that I didn't make myself. These were derived from a book called Grandmaster Preparation Positional Play by a very well-known author and trainer, Jakob. You can go check that book out. I might link it in the description of the video. But yeah, just getting straight into things. Here was my first game. Sorry, it's going a bit. Okay, here we have it. And we have this very symmetrical looking position, which it looks pretty dull at first, and it sort of is. But yeah, we got from an exchange Slav. I wasn't necessarily playing for a draw, but I felt like I was just a bit better here, and I thought that I could pose my opponent some troubles in this sort of position. Since, well, as you can see, my light squared bishop is a bit more active than my opponent's bishop. And it's not enough for like any like meaningful advantage, but it's something. And however, what I do have going against me in this position is the fact that my knight on c3 I felt is not so good compared to my opponent's knight on f6. My opponent's knight can come to e4 very easily, whereas if I want my knight to go to the equivalent square on e5, it's not very easy. And this kind of leads us to the first question here of our gods, which is, what is your worst placed piece? And although you could say my rook on a1 is my worst placed piece, that's valid, it's not doing anything in the moment, I felt that at this moment in time, it's not very easy to activate the rooks in general, because, okay, like, let's say I can double my rooks up in the c file with rook c2, okay, I move my queen to something like d2 first, and then I play my rook on a1 to c1. And sure, I double my rooks, they look like they're kind of good here, but as you'll see from my opponent's next move, king f7, he kind of initiated this sense of urgency from my part, because, well, his idea is not just to like run his king down the board like Nigel Short did in some game, but it was to play rook g8, that's why he played the g8 square, and then play h6 and g5 and start some kingside attack. And this really shook me up because I didn't expect this idea at all. So I had to have really a change of mindset here about how I was going to approach the position. And I can't just play slowly with something like queen 2 and doubling the rooks. Well, maybe I can actually, but I felt like I had to do something about the fact he's just going to launch all these pawns against me on the king side. So what I did is I felt like, okay, how am I going to improve the knight? So what I realized is, in order to get the knight to e5, I should also note that I don't think the knight's going to do much if I try to put in like a4 or c5. At the very least, he can just take me and then try and play this knight for his bishop position, and I'm not like terribly convinced. But even if, hypothetically speaking, I did get my knight to like c5 or something, it's not really doing much there. I think he can just like maybe kick it away. But yeah, what my idea was in the game was that to get this knight to e5, maybe I could play knight e2, and then you're like, where is it going from e2? It doesn't look like it's doing anything there. But I'm like, okay, I can play knight g1. And okay, it's illegal at the moment because the king's there, but first I played king h1, then knight g1, then knight f3, knight e5, and I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And okay, I tried playing knight e2. I think this is a bit inaccurate. I should have first played queen d2, because by playing knight e2 immediately, it allows bishop b5, and he can trade off light squared bishops, and now he's completely fine here. But my opponent, he didn't really want to trade off many pieces. He wanted to keep on as many pieces as possible, keep all his winning chances on live, which is sort of understandable. So he played rook g8 immediately. I played queen 2, getting out of all those discovered attacks. And he plays h6, preparing g5. And now I finally play king h1, g5, knight g1 finally. And here you might be wondering, what if g4? So this stops my whole idea, and I recognize that. But the thing is, although it stops my idea, it also kind of, his whole plan based on advancing these kingside pawns and creating this attack kind of comes to a stop once he plays g4, because now these lines are never going to be open on the king side. And I was kind of happy with this in the game, but objectively I think black is still fine. I think the engine might have even been arguing slightly better. But during the game I was like, and I think my opponent too, didn't really like the look of this. And in the game my opponent, what he did is he played g takes f4, and after e takes f4, he tried attacking the f4 pawn, and he tried playing a bunch of tempo moves, but they didn't really do much. And after this position which we got to, I was basically just had a very pleasant advantage, and later on some stuff happened in time trouble. I even sacrificed my queen, which was really interesting, but yeah, it didn't lead to well, it didn't lead to something, but unfortunately with the whole time trouble scramble, I messed up my advantage and ended up losing. Very tragic game, but yeah, that's chess sometimes. Moving on to the next example. So in this game I was playing with black here. This was in 2017 when I was around like mid 1900 FIDE. My opponent was like around 1800, I'd say. And we have this very interesting position that arises from the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation, where I played this whole knight h5 thing and we traded dark squared bishops. If you don't know what that means, it's okay. But basically we have this slightly, well, we have a very typical pawn structure, except the kings are just on the queen side, which is a bit rare. And the thing that you have to notice here is that my knight on h5, is doing nothing basically. His light squared bishop is better than my light squared bishop here. And statically speaking, I think white's just slightly better. If he can play like knight e5 and start pushing his kingside pawns, I think he is in excellent shape. So in the game, what I decided to do is I decided to play this move g6. As indicated by arrows just then, my idea is one to, well, it's a typical idea in the structure actually, but it's to play knight g7, and not bring the knight to f5, but bring the bishop to f5, trade off light squared bishops, because as I said earlier, the light squared bishop of whites is a bit better than ours. And also by doing this, I would, after an exchange of bishops, my knight will then come to a better square. Maybe after f5 will come to d6, which is a very nice square in some structure. So we play knight e5, as I was saying earlier, very thematic move. I play knight d7. I could play knight g7 immediately, but I felt that with this knight in e5, it can become a very annoying piece if you're not careful. So I want to try and exchange off as quickly as possible. And the typical idea would be to reinforce that knight with something like f4. But I wasn't too concerned about this in the game. I was thinking after something like this, I can play knight g7 anyway. And I can play like bishop f5, and I can still trade bishops and all that. And if he plays g4 in the game, well, like he did in the game, then I can play h5 and attack this weakness, and I think I'm doing pretty well here. I kind of spoiled what happened very quickly. Well, he exchanged, which makes it a bit different. He played knight a4, trying to activate the knight. I play knight g7 finally, and here he played this move g4, which I wasn't a fan of at all for him, because although it looks kind of strong at first, you're preventing us from playing bishop f5, and spoiler, the third question is prevent your opponent's ideas. And he kind of did that, but the problem was he created a lot of weaknesses in doing so. And if you've read Sam Shanklin's book, for example, he says like pawns don't move backwards, and this is a really important thing to understand when you move your pawns forward. Every time you move them forward, you're creating weaknesses. And not only does it like weaken like the pawn behind it and like some dark squares, this square for example. But it makes g4 itself just a very prime target to hit, which I did after playing h5. And as you can see already, things aren't simple for white, because if he plays g5, I take it. If he takes, I take the rook, this pawn's weak, my other rook can come over the kingside very quickly, and that kind of leaves him with this move rook hg1, which he played in the game. And the situation doesn't change a whole lot, I still take there. And once again, the g4 pawn is still weak, so how do you kind of like hammer down that weakness? Well, you can activate a piece that's not so active and at the same time attack the pawn with rook h4. He defended it with bishop e2, and it's not really easy to suggest much else. Like if he plays g5, I can play bishop f5, I can trade off my light squared bishops finally. g5 pawn is still weak, this is not looking good for him. And he played bishop e2, which didn't think was so good, felt kind of passive. And now this pawn on g4, okay, it's well defended, but this pawn f2 is not defended at all. So I played rook h2 now. And I was kind of expecting bishop d3 when after queen h4, this pawn is in some trouble, and if he defends it like this, then I can play bishop takes g4 maybe, and I'm just a pawn up now. So in the game he tried to get some active counterplay, and this is something that you can try and do sometimes when your opponent has some kind of attacks and threats going. You can try and just ignore them and carry out your own attacks and threats and whatnot. But unfortunately here, how he did it with queen b3, trying to play stuff like bishop a6, and if I play like bishop c8 back, he can consider taking on c6, with the idea that, well, like how his bishop I can't take it, it's because the pawn is pinned to the king, and it kind of looks scary. And during the game I was very hesitant to take on f2 at first, but then after some calculation I realized that this is really nothing, this just goes. So after bishop a6, I had bishop c8, and I think at first during the game I might have been thinking like bishop e6, and then like maybe this works, or maybe takes works, or I'm not sure. But yeah, just bishop c8, just defending b7 very steadily. And there's nothing you can do. You played knight c5. Well, one of the key ideas was that rook takes c6, king a8, and these pieces are just hanging. If he takes here, I just take back. b7 is defended by the queen. He's just exchanged down and very happy about life here. So he tried to play knight c5, but he was really just a pawn down and didn't have much going on after king a8. He had to retreat with the bishop. And I won the game without too much troubles, which is pretty nice. So moving on to the final example here. This was a more recent game which I played last year actually. It was the first tournament after the whole COVID stuff, although given that I currently live in Japan, have been living here for the last few years, usually it's like a few months between all these tournaments to begin with, so it didn't feel too much different anyway. But anyway, in this position, well, this game I should start off with, it was the first round of this tournament. I was playing a significantly weaker opponent, and usually when you're playing against some weaker opponents, you just tend to kind of play like very autopilot moves. You just play your first instinct and hope it goes well, and kind of what I've been doing so far this game, except here, I had to be rather careful, and this is whereas I was alluding to in the last game. Another important question that you need to ask yourself, the last one I'm covering in this video, is you need to watch out for your opponent's ideas. You need to be able to anticipate them and then work against them. And here, if I'm sure maybe some of you have noticed a move that looks very natural, which is tripling the heavy pieces on the d file, and while this looks very natural, it's actually not so good. And the reason isn't obvious at all, because it's like, what are they gonna take on d4? I just take here and d6 is hanging, they can't defend it, I'm just up a pawn, what's the problem here? And there's no problem here. The problem is in this position they have this really tricky move, and if you want to try to find it you can pause the video, but it's d5. And it looks kind of ridiculous at first, because it looks like this pawn should somehow be hanging on d5 and I should just be like easily winning. But it's not the case at all. If I take here, he plays c4, and my rook is trapped. It's crazy. I was like, wait, this can't be happening. And I was like, okay, maybe I can take on c5 first. He plays knight takes c5, attacking my rook. Okay, I have to move it. Then I'm like, hold on, he has knight b3. And he forks my rook and queen, and he's just winning material here. And then I realized that maybe this queen d2 move is just bad altogether. So I had to scrap that and try and find something else. And it wasn't really simple. And until I eventually realized that if this d5 move is really such a problem, maybe I should just take on c5 altogether, and if he plays knight takes c5, I just play rook d2 back, and I'm going to play b4 next, kicking away the knight soon. But most importantly, now that I have a much better control over the d5 square, there's just no way he's ever going to be able to play that without losing a pawn. And okay, if in case you're wondering about other moves, b takes e5, queen d2, this pawn d6 is going to hang. And if he plays d takes e5, I also play queen d2, and if he takes here, well, I mean, you can't really keep control of the d-file since I have all these three pieces here lined up, so he has to somehow give me control, whether that's like moving the rook here and letting me infiltrate like this, or just taking and letting me play queen d6 and then getting this view of the 6th rank and being able to attack all these weaknesses. So in the game, he played knight takes c5, I went back, and I was able to get in b4 very quickly, and his knight looked like crap on b7, and I could just stop here and say that that's like illustrating the point that I wanted to with his third question, but I'll continue a few more moves. Queen b3, improving my, what I felt was like my worst piece on c2. On b3, my queen's just a bit better. Maybe, as I just highlighted, I can one day play c5, and I can put some pressure on like this e6 pawn maybe. And he played rook fd8, and then I played rook a1, which was not the most accurate move. I had some more direct stuff, but I'm just activating once again my worst piece. My rook can come into a6, and in the game he didn't even notice my threat. He played king f7, I played rook a6. I snatched up that pawn, and I was just easily winning here. Alright, these are all the examples I had today, but I hope that you got something out of these examples and these questions, and that you can start applying them in your own games and get some results with them. But I'd just like to end the video on this note that even though these questions sound very simple and like intuitive, it's like, oh yeah, improve your worst piece, of course. It's like, I have to admit, it's like, I kind of felt that way at first, but the thing is that very often, even very strong players, it's like, unless we really take the time to consciously ask ourselves these questions, it's very easy to just leave some piece sitting off in the corner that's not doing anything, and then realizing like 15 moves later, like, oh wait, why isn't that piece doing anything? It's like, well, because you didn't do anything about it. And I think really asking these questions can help consolidate your positional understanding and just making better moves all around. But anyways, I hope if you liked this video that you could leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Anyways, until next time, see you.